Hello, and welcome to Matter of Fact, a podcast from the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center, where we report what matters. With support from the Scripps Howard Foundation, our center works to counter misinformation and strengthen truth-based journalism across communities in Southeast Mississippi. I'm your guest host for this episode, Morgan Gill. Today's story highlights our RHCJC news article on efforts to revive chamber-style business support in Greene County. The story focuses on how Main Street Leakesville leaders, county officials, and business owners are working to rebuild a structure that could better support small businesses, strengthen communication, and help keep more local spending inside the community. In this episode, we'll take a closer look at why that effort matters in a rural county, what gaps local leaders say still exist for small businesses, and what this renewed push could mean for Greene County's future. We'll start by looking at why leaders say the county needs this kind of support now and what they hope a stronger chamber effort can provide. Then we'll hear more about what business owners want from the process and why some say the effort could help small businesses feel more connected and more visible. Finally, we'll consider what this story reveals about rural economic development, local loyalty, and the role community organizations can play in helping small businesses grow. In Greene County, small businesses are easy to miss if you're not looking for them. They sit along familiar roads, on downtown blocks people pass every day, in buildings locals have known for years. And yet even in a small rural county, business owners and community leaders say people don't always know what's here, or how much those businesses need local support to keep going. This is part of what makes this story about more than a committee or a meeting. It is really a story about visibility, who gets seen, who gets supported, and what it takes for a rural community to build an economy that feels connected instead of scattered. Right now, leaders in Greene County are working to revive chamber-style business support through Main Street Leakesville Economic Development Committee. Their goal is to create something stronger and more active, a network that helps local businesses connect one another, reach more customers, and get help with the everyday challenges that come with staying open and trying to grow. Stephanie McClendon, who chairs the committee, said the work starts with listening.
From what we understand about what their needs are, it's going to be us working together to make those decisions, about what comes next and what's the best solutions for the businesses that are around based on their needs.
That answer is practical, but it also points to something larger. Because in a place like Greene County, support does not always come from a big institution or a major investment announcement. Sometimes it starts with people sitting in a room together and realizing they need a better way to share ideas, solve problems, and remind residents what is already here. That need became clearer as leaders talked about what has been missing. For about 4 years, they said chamber-style support in the county has been mostly inactive. And while economic development work has continued, the kind of day-to-day help that small businesses often need has been harder to find. April Stennett, Greene County's Economic Development Director, put it plainly.
There's a true gap when you don't have a chamber for supporting those small businesses in a way that through my role I cannot.
That distinction matters. Industrial recruitment and large development projects are one kind of economic work, but a local boutique, flower shop, bookstore, or restaurant may need something more immediate. It may need help with promotion, better networking, more communication between business owners, access to people who can answer practical questions, a stronger public presence, and a way to feel less alone. And that sense of isolation can be easy to overlook. In rural communities, people often talk about closeness. Everybody knows everybody. Word travels fast. But that does not always mean businesses are automatically connected or fully visible to the people around them. In fact, one of the striking things leaders described during their early organizing meetings was how even they learned about businesses they had not really noticed before. That says something. A rural place can feel small and still be disconnected. And when businesses are disconnected, it becomes harder for them to share customers, compare ideas, or build the kind of local momentum that helps a business last past its opening year. Megan Smith, owner of Daisy May Flower Shop, says she hopes the effort helps do exactly that.
To me, small business ownership is kind of like a big family, and so we all need to work together and to make things happen in our little community.
That may be the clearest emotional center of this story. Not competition alone, but cooperation. Not just surviving, but helping each other stay visible. Because this effort is not only about attracting people from outside Greene County, it is also about reaching the people who already live there. The residents commuting out for work, running errands elsewhere, or buying things out of habit in other towns when some of those goods and services may already be available close to home. Again and again, the idea came up in the reporting. Look here first. Spend here first. Support here first. That message is not only rooted in nostalgia, it is tied to a practical reality. Local businesses sponsor school teams, show up for the community events, donate to programs, open their doors early and stay late. In small towns, they often do more than provide a product. They help hold the place together. And leaders behind this chamber effort says that if residents want a stronger local economy, that support has to move both ways. Randy Pierce lives in the area and is on the committee. He says that kind of shared effort could help the county make better use of what it already has.
It's an opportunity for when you're in a rural area like ours to everybody kind of pull the same direction, whether it's the towns, the city, the county, organizations like Main Street Leakesville, to work together to maximize the use of our resources to elevate local businesses.
Pulling in the same direction, that phrase stays with you because it captures the challenge here so well. In a rural county, growth is rarely about one big fix. It is usually smaller than that, slower than that, more local than that. It looks like business owners meeting regularly. It looks like people asking questions without feeling embarrassed. It looks like longer store hours on the right night. It looks like shared events, better promotion, and stronger communication. It looks like a resident deciding to buy the couch, the flowers, the dinner, or the gift in town instead of somewhere else. Those choices may seem small on their own, but together leaders say they shape what kind of business community Greene County can become. The next meeting is set for May 21st, and organizers hope it gives local businesses more ideas about what chamber-style support could look like moving forward. But the bigger test comes after that. Will businesses keep showing up? Will residents change their habits? Will support turn into something consistent enough to last? For now, the effort is still taking shape as local businesses work to make sure they're not overlooked in the places they already call home. After reporting on Greene County's effort to revive chamber-style support for local businesses, we wanted to hear more about how this story came together in the field. Senior reporter Kristen Kaler headed this project and joins us with more about the reporting process, how this story moved beyond a simple meeting recap and what it revealed about the deeper needs facing rural business communities. So, the first question we'll just dive right into is, when you first started reporting this story, what did you expect it to be about, and just when did you realize there was a deeper story underneath the meeting itself?
Yeah, so I originally saw the story pitch on Facebook. Obviously they had been advertising there was going to be a meeting, and it discussed, developing a chamber of commerce. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, there's so many towns that I hear of that already have them. So to hear that there was one being developed in Greene County was kind of crazy to me. So, I went into the interview and I realized that they had actually had one, but it had been, for lack of a better word, just inactive for several years. And so to hear about that, the fact that they had it and it just hadn't been there, and now they're trying to revive it to help all these businesses, I think that was what kind of clicked for me as being the deeper part of it. And it's also being able to go back and report on it in the future. I told them already I'm excited to see what kind of development comes out of it. So I think that was the deeper story there.
Okay. And just one challenge with stories like this is that people often speak in broad or formal language. How did you kind of work through that in the field and figure out what they were really trying to say?
Ooh, okay, so I do follow economics, I feel like as much as anybody else would, but I'm no expert by any means. And so when I knew that I was going to be doing this story, I obviously did a little bit of digging, did a little bit of research, kind of gathered up my notes and tried to evaluate what I would need before I walked into this interview. And I felt a little bit better about it, but, obviously there's still going to be some stuff that I don't know about, especially in specific communities. And so when they would kind of discuss like this, that, and the other, I would kind of have to stop and be like, oh, can you clarify this for me, just to make sure I get it correct. And that's something that I emphasize in all of my interviews a lot of times, is I will ask them, I want to make sure that I don't get this wrong, and I want to make sure that this isn't being misinterpreted in any way. So I always ask them to clarify anything that I feel like even 1% unsure about.
Yes, okay, yeah, and there are plenty of times when I've had to ask for them to expound on something that I probably didn't, know about at all. So I definitely understand that. And just another question I do have is when you were interviewing multiple people in the room, just what was the biggest challenge in keeping the conversation clear and just making sure you got usable answers?
Ooh, okay, so I have actually never interviewed, I think it was 7 people in the room at once. And it was definitely interesting. We ended up we put the mic down, and I kind of, told them beforehand, I was like, let's kind of go one at a time. Obviously you guys can answer however you want in any capacity, just kind of do it one at a time so that I could make sure that the audio is clear. And I did have a little bit of trouble getting it to be completely clear, and so I know better for next time. But I would definitely say it was kind of almost like hosting a panel, which was really interesting. But I would ask them a question, and I would kind of just let them go down the line, and they all gave really good insight. I don't think there was a single one where I had like trouble per se, with not having usable quotes, because they all had a lot to say, and all being from different perspectives was really, really helpful as well. And it helped me understand better, going back to that last question.
Okay. And just were there any moments where you had to slow the conversation down or just redirect it or ask follow-up questions to get more specific answers? And just what did that teach you?
I don't necessarily think there were any moments that I really had to slow the conversation down. Maybe aside from, like I said, I had them answer one at a time. And so I would ask, and there would be, a little pause of silence before they would all kind of look around and decide who wanted to answer first. And we would go down the line. So I guess that would be the quote unquote slowing down the conversation. So, and like I said earlier, if they mentioned either vocabulary or something that I was unfamiliar with around Greene County, I would kind of say, hey, can you clarify this for me? Can you just make sure that I understand what you're telling me right now?
Okay. This story actually deals with ideas like economic vitality, chamber support, and business development, which can sound a little abstract. So how did you work to translate that into something clear and relatable for readers?
Yeah, so like I said in my last point, or one of my last points, a lot of it was doing the research beforehand, especially going into the specific community. I want to know what kind of businesses are around. I want to know what this economic development committee looked like. And so I'd get a little bit of research, and obviously things, like I said, I follow economics just about as much as another average person like me. And so a lot of it was I could also kind of piece some things together. So, one person would talk about one thing and another would add on, and I was like, oh, this clicks now. Okay. And so a lot of it was, like I said, research, putting it together in real time during the interview, asking them for clarification. And when it comes to translating it, I just kind of took a step back and I would reread it, and I would tell myself, or I'd ask myself, okay, if I were reading this for the first time, what would I need to put here so that I made sure I would understand? And that's always what I do with my stories, because I know if I go and read another article, I would want it to be the same way. I want to be able to read it for the first time and go, okay, I understand what they're saying. And so that's what I always try to do, because I know I can get a little confused sometimes. I can get a little tangled up in the vocabulary.
Okay. And just what did you hear in the field that helped you understand that was really a story about gaps, visibility, and support for small businesses, not just the committee getting organized?
So I would say something that really stuck out with me is one of the interviewees was saying, even he didn't know that there were some businesses around in the county. And it's not just Leakesville, it was all of Greene County that they're trying to get connected and get together. And they kept reiterating that they wanted to bring in workforce opportunities and resources and get these these businesses in communication with one another and get them talking and get events set up. They were talking about having maybe not farmers market days, but looking into similar events like that. And so that's what really showed me that it wasn't just about getting this committee together, but it was really about bringing economic vitality into Greene County, getting all these businesses seen, because I was driving around and they had some great stuff that I had never heard of before. And so if it's important for me for them to get out there, it is a billion times more important for those locals and those business owners and their families to get the word out about those businesses.
And it's always crazy to me to hear that, just in small towns, that a lot of people don't know about the businesses in that small town. But I'm like, how? How do you not know about them? But okay, my next question is, you also spoke with a business owner separately. Just how did that interview help ground the story and just give it a more human perspective?
So obviously talking to a business owner herself, gave me the perspective of like, okay, so, this committee is doing this, but these people actually know about it and they're anticipating it and they're excited for it. This is they want to see things like this. And I've been on several stories where there would be topics we were asking people about and they're like, well, I had no idea. And so I think what really put it in place for me that this is going to be a good thing for Greene County is the fact that they're looking forward to this. Ms. Smith said that she was looking forward to being able to talk to other business owners and getting this community stuff together and getting her business out there. And so I think that just kind of goes to show, and also to mention, they talked about how close-knit of a community they are. And I think them being able to really, really get into the nitty-gritty of communicating and offering resources to help one another is going to be a really great thing for them.
Okay. And were there any reporting challenges that readers would not see in the final story, but that shaped how you approach the writing?
I think the only thing that really comes to mind is going back to the fact that I interviewed like 7 people for the first time.
Yeah.
Because that was definitely, I kind of had to reevaluate how I was going to conduct the interview because I wanted to make sure that I heard everybody's voices and heard what everybody had to say. And so it did take me a little bit longer to just kind of go through everything and make sure that I was hearing every side and getting all the information right. Like I said, I didn't want to misinterpret or say the wrong thing. So I think in the final product, at least I hope you don't notice that. So it was definitely a learning experience for me, but I enjoyed it.
Yes. Okay. And just after reporting this story, what did you learn about covering business or economic development stories in a way that still feels local and people-centered?
I think when it comes to covering businesses or economic development, especially in these local communities, and with them being very people-centered, I guess I would just have to say, or I guess emphasize just how important it is, not only to these people, these business owners in these communities, but people outside of it. I personally am a strong vocal supporter of supporting local businesses over chains any day. And I think that what they're doing is really great. And I would say just keeping in mind how impactful covering stories like this can be, because at least I hope this story gets out there and people will be like, oh, well, I should go to Greene County and check out these local businesses now. That's what I want at the end of the day, is for these communities to thrive. And I guess maybe instead of like learning, that's just kind of something that I kept in mind.
Okay. And my last and final question is just, what is one lesson from this story that you think or young reporters should keep in mind when covering economic development or just local business news?
Oh, definitely make sure you come prepared. Obviously, on all fronts, you're going to want to do that every single time. But if it's a topic that you feel like you don't know enough about, definitely do your research. Even once you feel like you've done enough, do a little more. Come over-prepared instead of under-prepared. That's kind of a rule of thumb for everything you do. But I think for me, like I said, all the vocabulary that may have come into play, I would have much rather at least had a vague idea than going in there and having no clue. And like I said, I could ask them for clarification while I was at the interview. But it is nice to just kind of be in the know. And for me personally, if I know what I'm walking into and I've done my research, I'll know that I did, because when I write the story, I know that I've done my job if I can understand what's going on from the point where I'm interviewing the person to going through the quotes to writing the story to reading the story online. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Miss Kaler. And those are all the questions. Finally, we turn to our What is True segment, where we look at the media literacy side of this story. Stories about chambers of commerce, economic development groups, and local business support can sound simple on the surface, but they can also include jargon, broad promises, and assumptions that need closer examination. To talk more about that, we're joined by our What is True producer, Walker Scott. So, Walker, the first question I do have about this story is, when local leaders talk about economic development, what should audiences listen for to understand what that really means in practice?
Yeah, so economic development can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it can mean recruiting large employers or building infrastructure, and other times it means supporting the businesses that already exist in a community. Audiences should pay attention to whether leaders are speaking in broad terms or pointing to specific actions, timelines, and resources.
Okay, and why is it important for reporters to ask how a new chamber or committee effort will be different from what existed before?
Yeah, so that question helps move the story from announcement to accountability. If a group is being revived after a period of inactivity, then the public needs to know what changed, what the previous gaps were, and what concrete steps are being taken now. Otherwise, people only hear the promise and not the plan.
Okay, and just in a story like this, what kinds of sources help verify whether a chamber or business support effort is actually meeting a need?
So, reporters should be the ones that are able to talk to multiple kinds of sources. That includes organizers, local business owners, government officials, and, when possible, people who are involved, or people who are affected, rather, but not involved. Because those are the people that need the voices most out of everybody, and that's exactly what the RHCJC is here to do, and who the RHCJC is here to give voices to. Public records, meeting notes, business data, and local economic reports can also help confirm whether the need is real and how widespread it is.
Okay, and just how can journalists avoid how can they avoid simply repeating positive claims and supporting local business?
So reporters should ask specific follow-up questions like what services will be offered and who will benefit, how often will meetings happen, what problems are business owners actually facing, and what evidence is there to support that problems exist. That kind of reporting helps separate broad support language from measurable plans.
Yes, and just what should audiences look for to know whether a story about local economic development has been carefully reported?
Yeah, they should look for clear sourcing and specific examples and transparency about what is known and what is still uncertain. A strong story will explain not only what leaders hope will happen, but also what businesses say they need and what steps are actually underway.
Okay, and just my last question I have is, why does local journalism matter in stories like this?
Yeah, so local journalism helps communities move beyond just simple slogans. It puts local claims on the record and asks follow-up questions and gives residents a clearer picture of what is being promised and what progress is actually being made. That kind of reporting helps communities make informed decisions about what growth should look like where they live.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And that's What is True with producer Walker Scott. You can learn more about the program or submit a question of your own at rhcjcnews.com/WITREQ or by calling 601-266-TRUE. That's 601-266-8783. This episode was adapted from our RHCJC news story on Greene County leaders working to revive chamber support for local businesses. A special thanks to the people who shared their time and perspective for this story, including local leaders, committee members, and business owner Megan Smith of Daisy May Flower Shop. You can read the full story and explore related reporting at rhcjcnews.com. Be sure to follow us on social media at RHCJC News to keep up with more stories just like this one. As always, thank you for listening and for spending time with us as we take you behind the scenes of the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center. I'm Morgan Gill, and this is Matter of Fact.